Good day, everyone, wherever you are right now. I'm Juliane Padrao. I'm here in this conference to talk a little bit about the P300XM and the Azure Database Administrator Associate certification. I'm a data and AI content developer at Microsoft, so super exciting to be here with you all today. My background was always in the Microsoft data platform. I was a database administrator for many, many years. Then I transitioned to data engineer. And then recently, about 6 years ago, I transitioned my skill set in SQL products to Azure environment and cloud. So, just to talk a little bit about our team manages and builds technical learning experiences that help customers worldwide build their own technical skills, right, in their own technical journey. So, from Azure SQL to Azure Machine Learning, Power BI, and everything in between, we are there. And speaking about a little bit about learning experiences, you can see there, you have my LinkedIn profile right there. So I'm constantly posting educational materials on my LinkedIn. So please stop by and say hi if you want to learn more about Azure SQL, Azure Machine Learn, or Azure Synapse. So just stop by. I would love to connect with you. Today, super excited to speak to you about the P300 exam, which we all know it's tied to the Azure Database Administrator certification. So I'm presenting this session with Sandra. Sandra is a senior business program manager at Microsoft. So more towards the end of the presentation, Sandra will talk more about the Microsoft exam and share some additional information and resources with you. We want to make sure as well that this presentation is enjoyable and informational at the same time. So please, if you have any questions, you can ask them along the way, or you can wait until the very end of the session to ask them. We have some colleagues looking out for questions, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go. So without even further much talking, let's jump right into it. Today, we're going to review your path to the P300 certification, and we're going to talk a little bit deeper about the technical content that is covered in that exam. So, like, our main purpose here is to help you and give all the guidance that we can to help you succeed. And then we're going to also explore the Microsoft exams and share resources to help you prepare. So it's an hour session, but I'm going to be talking a lot. So please, you can post your questions in the chat, and we will be glad to answer them as we go. Here we are, right? We are trying to learn about the exam DP300, what we need, what are the technical skills that we need to know to succeed in that exam. So here we have the exam, the official exam name, and this exam name changed back in August, right? So before that, were administering relation databases in Microsoft Azure, and then because of we switched gears a little bit to remove some of the open source content that we were providing before to now focus only on Azure SQL technologies and offerings. And here you're going to have, we have the role description and the skills that we are measuring. We're going to talk about them in more details ahead. But you also have here the link, right? And this link will take you to the certification page where you are going to have a little bit more details about this certification. Here we are, right? We are this pink circle right here. We want to know everything we can about the DP300 exam, right? And we're going to share everything with you. But although not required, we do recommend that you take Azure Fundamentals and Azure Data Fundamentals exam if you have done so. it's highly recommended. So, of course, if you are an experienced DBA, right, in the field, and you have some experience already in Azure, you can succeed without it. But to give you a little bit of more understanding about what we're gonna cover in the exam to help you prepare more with some more substantial knowledge, it's important to have a little bit understanding about those baselines, right? Which both exams will give you. And then you take the exam, and finally you become certified, right? We want you all to succeed, so that's why we are here today. Here we're going to start talking a little bit about, in a high level, of the functional groups that are being covered for the P300. And here you see this is the XM object domain breakdown. Each one of those is called functional groups, right? And what they do, they basically tell all the topics and all the tasks that you need that a DBA in the field, right, should know to become an Azure Database Administrator certified. So, for example, you have here plan and implement data platform resources. You see 20 or 25%. This means that in the exam, there are going to be 20 to 25% of questions related to that functional group and so forth. So here, what I'm going to do, we have those two links here up here. One is related to the exam page, and the other one is related to the exam guide. What I'm going to do, um, I have the first link here, which is actually the exam page. You can see here some details about the exam, so you can understand what you expect when you want to learn more, if you want to learn more about the certification. And you can schedule your exam through that button, right? And here you can see the skills that are measured on that exam. And you can even download the outline so you can check later to find gaps in your knowledge, things that you need to focus more or less, depending on where you are on your journey. And a little bit below, you can see here there are two ways to prepare. So we offer the self-paced training, which is on Learn. It's hosted on Learn. And you can see here we have all the learning paths that support that certification, right? And right here, you have the instructor-led paid training. And Sandra will talk more about it later, more towards the end of this presentation. But note that there are two types of training that we offer, right? And they're all available to you. So coming back to the presentation, we also have another link. If you click here, you're gonna actually see the exam outline. And if you can see here, there is the audience profile, the details, all the details about each functional group that we talked about, and actually the tasks and the topics that each one has and covers. So I'm just going through that a little bit so you know how to access that when you need, right? It's on the certificate, it's on the exam page, and then you can download the skills that we have here to get you prepared. And also on the same page, right? It's really convenient. You also have all the learning paths that you need to know to take the exam. So coming back to our presentation, right? We were right here. So the next one, and now we're gonna cover each module that the course TP300, administering Microsoft Azure SQL Solutions, all the modules that are being covered by that and supported by that certification. I'm not going through a lot, but just notice that I put here so you know for example, Module 5 and Module 6, those are new modules that we introduced just really recently. So there are a lot of asks in the field that to include more migration content, and that that's actually some of the major tasks, right? Especially if you go into the cloud for the first time, that you need to know. So we changed a lot of our contents. We made a massive, without including the name of the certification itself in the course, we also changed it, all the modules, some of the modules names, and including some topics. And we are going to the topics, the new topics as well, later on. And here, for example, if you see here, those three modules, for example, are all related to monitor and optimize operational resources. So that is tied back to one of the functional groups that are going to be required in the exam. So our certification, our modules, were everything matching on what is required by the object domain. So now we are going module by module, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the technical part of it and what to consider when taking the exam, or what you need to expect in terms of content itself or a skill set that you need to have. So the first module is prepare to maintain SQL database on Azure. And what does that mean? We kind of create one separate module to set a baseline of understanding, right? And I know it's sometimes so complicated. We talk about Azure SQL, but what Azure SQL database is, and what about SQL management instances? Are they the same? So this is kind of the initial steps for the further modules that we are going a little bit down and deeper on each one of those products and offerings. So you're also going to learn a lot about the Azure Database Administrator responsibilities, right? If you're coming from on-premises, are there any difference when we are talking about Azure, how they relate to other Azure Data Platform roles, right? In general, and I say that because cloud service can be broken down into two sets of services. We have infrastructure as a service, IaaS, and platform as a service, which is PaaS, right? And so we are going to talk about those concepts as well and all those offerings that we have available in Azure. On module 2, for example, we are going to start going a little deeper on IaaS, which is basically Azure, a SQL Server running on an Azure VM. So we're going to explore the basics of a SQL Server, learn how hybrid scenario works. And you can see here that we included a completely new topic, especially now that we are talking a lot about Azure Arc, right? So companies, they are trying to understand what options are available on Azure. Sometimes implementing a hybrid infrastructure is complicated, right? So we are trying to cover a lot of the basic understanding when we are talking about databases, SQL databases, right? So for some companies, implementing a hybrid infrastructure is also an excellent first step, right, in evaluating cloud computing, and just to make sure that it will work for them and that will make sense. So hybrid scenario will also cover a lot of those use cases. And then we're going to talk about explore performance and security options. Those will be covered. So HADR and the performance and security will also be covered ahead into more details. But like other modules, this is just set the basic rules for the modules ahead. On module 3, for example, we are going to talk about PaaS solutions. So here we're going to most focus on ways to provision, deploy Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Management Instance, and Azure SQL Edge. So hyperscale function, for example, is a completely new topic that we included in the certification that was not there before. As long as details completely details and more information about Azure SQL Management Instance as well. And here, so when we're talking about Azure SQL, we sometimes never heard about it, right? It's a new concept and a new product that is out there as well. But basically, SQL Edge is a robust database for edge computing, and it combines capabilities such as data streaming and time series. So it's a really great opportunity with built-in machine learning and graph features if you want and if you had that need in your own environment, depending on your business case, right? So on module 4, we are going to start talking a little bit about migrating to SQL and what to consider, what are the use cases that we have, and how compatibility level affects your query optimizer. And we also is going to understand Azure Preview features and describe some options when considering to migrate to Azure SQL. And this one here, this is a completely new module, like we talked before, that is focused on how to migrate SQL workloads to Azure SQL databases. In this module, we'll learn to demonstrate the benefits and process for moving a SQL Server database to Azure SQL database. You look at how to migrate SQL Server workloads. You begin by exploring the pre-migration considerations, right? It's like a planning phase that you need to take into account before a migration. So what do you need to consider when we even talking about migrating our databases and how to even create a SQL database to support our needs? All of that is being considered here, and it's only focused just to make that clear. Everyone is just focused on Azure SQL databases. But on the next module, though, we do have kind of the same looking and feel that we have in the previous one, but just focus on Azure SQL Managed Instance, right? How to migrate to Managed Instance. So and just to give a little bit of insight in there, this is actually the fastest and least expensive method if you're considered to migrate an application or workload to the cloud. We call that lift and shift migration because it's easy, right? Because there is a high compatibility between a SQL Server on-premise and a SQL managed instance. So if you ever considering, this is a good option if you prefer to migrate with a little database administrator and developer time as possible to keep your project with a low cost, right? And here on module 7, we have configure database authentication and authorization. So here we're going to talk a lot about contrast authentication using Azure Active Directory, Windows Active Directory, and SQL Server authentication. What are the differences, right? What are the main things I need to consider if I'm moving to Azure SQL? So while the built-in roles in SQL provide a broad range of security privileges that we all know, many applications need more granular security on database options. So we're gonna look for those as well and investigate that. And then we have a completely new topic that we now are talking. So yeah, I have all my security. I'm following all the best practices, right? But if something happens, if I have a failure, how can I monitor that? What are the failures that I should expect and how to solve them? So this is kind of the topic, a new topic that we included, not only in the exam, but also in our content. On module 8, for example, protect data in transit and at rest. Well, this model explores the encryption options available within Microsoft SQL, so not only Microsoft SQL Server, but Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance as well. So, and here we have a new topic that we also included, which will explain how to enable encrypted connection Basically, we're going to talk about TLS, which is Transport Layer Security, which is a protocol for encrypting connections. You will learn not only how to configure it and how to use it as well. So basically, when we are talking about encryption methods, there are three scenarios to consider, right? We have what we call data at rest, which is encrypting the data while it's on a file storage, right? That's why at rest is important there. So data in transit, on the contrary, it's encrypting it while it travels through a private or public network. And then we also have a third one, which is data in use, which is encrypted while it's on cache, right? It can be a memory cache or a CPU cache. So those are the three main components when we are talking about encryption, and we cover a few of them in that module. On Module 9, we're going to talk about implement compliance control for sensitive data. So here we're going to explore data classification capabilities and degrees of confidentiality. We're going to implement security options to maintain private data safe, for example. So why server and database audit are important? What are the difference between those two, right? How to implement row level security and dynamic data masking. And those are new topics as well. So we included a new unit only to talk about SQL Database Ledger and also Azure Purview. They're all fresh and new content, so make sure you check it out. And you can always reach out through our social networks and on my LinkedIn profile to give feedback. We would love to hear from you on that as well. On Module 10, and this is the first module of a set of three that we are going to talk about in a moment, that talks about start talking about monitoring and performance optimization, right? So here is describe performance monitoring. So here we're going to understand how to monitor your database performance. We are going to also compare Azure and on-premise tools for monitoring. So when we are talking about Azure, are the same set of rules that I have on premises available on Azure? Where are the differences, what they are, right? How to use each one of those. And the main thing is we also going to understand how to create a baseline. So coming from a database administrative background as well, it's a baseline is so important, right? Sometimes you have your database there, and 3 in the morning you receive a call in the middle of the night. I believe most of you have been there. If not, well, it's not a good feeling, right? You receive your application stopped in the middle of the night. No one can do anything. You have transactions coming that can't complete. So when we are talking about baseline, we need to understand and set the ground rule of what is normal, right, in that environment, what we consider normal. And everything that deviates from that normality, from our baseline, it's actually something that we need to take an action on, right? So you can start being proactive, right? And it's so important, especially for that role. So this skill remains the same, and that doesn't change because you move to Azure. Those are still important skills for a database administrator. And also here at the very end, we included a new topic, which is it's also covered in the exam, which is Azure SQL Insights. So for those who are not familiarized with that, SQL Insights is actually in preview and is a comprehensive solution for monitoring any product in the Azure SQL family. So it's really cool. It centralizes all your performance data in one central place. It's really nice. And still talking about monitoring and performance, so we have the module 11, which configure SQL Server resources for optimal performance. And for folks that attending this session that is really well familiarized with on-premise SQL Server, it's kind of what we are covering here. We are covering a lot of TempDBs, right? TempDBs data files. What are those best practices for our database files? What about transaction logs? What about our data files? So everything here it's more towards on-premise and SQL Server running on a Azure VM. And at the very end, finally, we're going to understand use cases and scenarios to configure a resource governor. So this is a really cool feature that we have there. And so we are going to show some examples as well in the content. On module 11, we're going to talk about configure database for optimal performance. So everything within the database that we can do to improve the performance. So we're going to understand database scope configurations, what is out there, right? Even if your database is in the cloud, ongoing performance related maintenance are critical, right? So we all know that we need to keep our indexes up to date and our statistics. So we also going to learn how features of intelligent query processing, we call it IQP, how does it relate to Azure and what is it about? And we also going to explore automatic tuning feature on Azure, which is super. It's a new concept. Well, we covered that before, but right now we extended it a little bit to put some more advanced concepts in the content. On module 13, we'll explore query performance optimization. So you will learn how to read and understand various form of execution plans, right? You're going to compare estimated versus actual plans and how plans are generated. And then you understand the purpose and benefits of the query store, right? You also, it is a new content as well that we are not covering before, investigate. So there are so many reports available when we're talking about query stores, right? You have the regressed queries. How do we analyze a regressed query that is available there? How we can benefit from there? And last, you're going to understand how blocking and locking affects your database engine and what you need to do to solve those issues. So here we are going to talk more about query performance in this module. And on the module 14, we are going to explore performance-based design, right? This is still an important topic for a database administrator. You need to understand normal form and how it affects database performance, right? Investigate the impact of proper data type usage. And I say that because most of the time you may be working with a third party vendor application that you don't have control to change the database, right? Most of those third party vendors doesn't allow that, and you can lose the support if you do that. But understanding how things are working on the database design thing, it will help you if you have any problems with performance, right? Because you already know how the table structures are, you already know the scheme of the database. So it is important. Although most of the time we can change it, it is important to understand. And the best of the world is if you have in-house developers, right? Maybe we are talking about an application that was built in-house, and now you do have a little bit of more control to come back to data engineers and maybe developers and talk to them and propose some changes to improve the performance. So on module 15, we are going to we're going to talk about evaluate performance improvements. So we're going to talk about weight statistics and what are the possible changes that we need to make when we're talking about index and poor performance in index. What are the for the type of tuning that we can make on indexes, covered index, non-cluster indexes, column store indexes, right? We're going to reveal all of that. And I say that one of the challenges for DBAs is how to evaluate those, right? Sometimes we have a poor performing query online and we cannot sure how to change them to achieve that. So all of that is going to be revealed in that module. And also, we're going to review how to make minor tweaks, right? Sometimes there are those little things that we can make that we improve performance considerably. So, and also, last but not least, we're going to understand how query hints work and when to use them. Should we use them? That's a big question mark there. Well, maybe, maybe not, or maybe you're working with a third-party vendor and database there you don't have control, but they implemented a few query hints, and that is hurting now that is in production, and you have a massive workload. It's kind of hurting your performance. So you need to understand them at least, and you need to know when or when not to use them so you can start having those conversations in your team and in your company. On module 16, we are going to start to talk about automation, right? And I'm really excited about those modules ahead. We have three set of modules that we're going to focus strongly on database automation. So I would say those modules was kind of built from scratch from the old content that we used to have with now this new version. So super exciting. So here we're going to explore multiple deployment models. We're going to talk about Azure Resource Manager templates, ARM templates, right? We're going to talk about bicep files just for deploying Azure SQL resources. And on the second topic, this is completely new here. We were even, and I use Azure CLI a lot in the past on my automation scripts, and I was really happy to have to included that part here. So it's completely new. How can you take advantage of Azure CLI on your automation? And then, like I said, Azure Resource Manager templates and Bicep and also understand the differences, right? When we are talking about multiple command line options, what are the differences? So if I need to run a script, I can run it through PowerShell and CLI, but when should I choose one versus another? Is that any preferable or recommended approach? So this is the module that we are going to cover all of it. On module 17, we are going to talk specific about SQL agent jobs, right? It's also a part of the certification because we have SQL Server on-premise, SQL Server running on an Azure VM, and we also have SQL managed instances, which also has SQL agent jobs, right? You can have them. So here we're going to talk about explore SQL automation, just focus on SQL agent jobs. And just to add a little bit here, one of the ways you can benefit from Azure is using the built-in resource. So if you're running, although you have different automation mechanisms out there, different third-party vendor, I was always a strong advocate to using the native tools, right? SQL agent, right? It's easier, it's uncomplicated, it's everything embedded in just one solution without relying on external resources that sometimes get in the middle and overcomplicate, especially if you have like a complex, right? A complex workflow. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. On module 18, we are going to talk about manage Azure past tasks using automation. And here, we're going to focus more about what we have available for PaaS, right? For Azure SQL Database PaaS solution. So we are going to explore the capabilities of Azure automation. And here, we're going to also run some create, right? Not just configure it. We're going to create some run books with PowerShell scripts embedded where you can schedule it. You can create a completely set of jobs. You can install modules, create credential to authenticate. So it's super cool. And those three new topics are really exciting. So Elastic Jobs is kind of a new feature. So we are now covering Elastic Jobs in the content and in the exam as well. And we also covering logic apps for database workflow. So these logic apps is mainly used by developers or DevOps engineers, but now what we did is we can also, if you're on Azure, you can also take um, advantage of that functionality of that product to create your own database workflows, right? Why not, right? It's out there, it's available for us. And then, well, you create, right? You create your Azure automation account, you create your runbook or even an Elastic Jobs, no matter each option that you choose. How can we monitor that? How we can make sure that they are healthy, that they run in the way they should be running, right? So we created a new topic only for monitoring automated tasks as well. So super nice the changes we made here. On module 19, and this is the first module that we will start talking about high availability, right? So, for example, you're gonna learn how to plan an appropriate high availability and disaster recovery strategy based on RTO and RPO. Where are those, right? Where are the difference between those two metrics? Um, and explore available high availability and disaster recovery options, not only for infrastructure as a service, but also for PaaS environments, right? What is available in Azure SQL? What is available in an Azure SQL managed instance? What about SQL Server running on a VM? And then you're going to start creating your appropriate high availability and disaster recovery strategy. So our plan with that module is that at the end of it, you review all the options available and kind of start planning in your own environment what is the best approach based on all requirements that you have, because there is no one solution that fits all the scenarios, right? Mostly for cost, maybe it's cost related, maybe it's a technical component that it will not allow you to implement one solution versus another. So it's important to understand all those differences, to understand what you can do in your own environment, in your own situation. So on module 21, we are going to explore IaaS and PaaS solutions for high availability and disaster recovery. Here, we're going into each option and go deeper on which one and all those features and how you can configure them. So we're going to deploy Windows Server failover cluster. We're going to talk about failover cluster instances, for example, and availability groups. You even going to learn how to configure temporal tables. And talking about PaaS, We're going to learn about georeplication and auto failover groups. And for that, we have labs on Learn for that as well. We're going to talk a little bit about the labs. So it's super exciting that you can have the benefit of exploring that through the labs that we also provide. So I'm talking here, but anytime you have a question, you can just make sure that you put it in the chat, and we're gonna make sure that we answer them. Um, what else? Let me think. Let's jump to module 21. And here we're going to talk about backup and restore databases, right? We talk a lot about HA and DR, but if none of that works and you're trying to fail over your database and you're receiving failures, maybe it's something that was not configured properly, or maybe it's something that is not available by the time you try to fail over, or something else going on. We need to have a good backup strategy, right? And when we are talking about no matter IaaS, infrastructure as a service, or PaaS, you need to have a good backup strategy. And just make sure that you test your backup plan every I don't know, maybe it's 3 months, right? Maybe it's 6 months. I work for companies that I had to run a full run of a DR test every 6 months, right? And you can use a backup and restore as a DR solution depending on your environment. So knowing all the implications of having that and making sure you understand all of those. So make sure you test your backups. That's my and as a DBA, if you work in the field, you probably know, but sometimes someone coming into the SQL Server world will not have that understanding. So it's important to reinforce that. So here we're gonna plan and implement policy for recovering your data. If you have any failures, maybe it's a hardware failure, right? Maybe it's an application failure that will impact your database. So we're gonna explore various options for how and where to backup and restore your databases. And here, this was our last module, right? And we covered a lot of technical content. So again, any questions, just we will make sure we get to it. But I really want to talk about the labs, right? Labs are an important component for what we offer, either on self-paced learning journey or even a structure-led journey. So we offered a hosted virtual machine. So what is a hosted virtual machine, right? We provide the lab environment for you. You don't need to, I mean, although you can, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you don't need to spin up any server, right? Or you don't need to have a subscription to run the resources in the lab. So we provide all the infrastructure for you so you can do it and try it on your own, right? And we know that we all learn best when we have a chance to implement it, right? So you're going to have an Azure subscription resource group with the permission, including the permissions required to complete the lab. So it's everything prepared for you there. Um, and what I'm going to do now, I think, I'm going to do a quick demo for you because it's important that you understand how to find those labs, right? So let me just start presenting. And then, so suppose you're here, right, in the exam page, like we went through a while back. So you can see here that we have all the learning paths that we just talked about. And those learning paths, inside of each learning path, so for example, plan and implement data platform resources. you have all those modules that we just talked about. Migration, the new migration modules, you see here, they're all here for you. So when you go to the learning path page, you see the modules. And if you expand here in the overview, you're going to see all the units in that module, part of that module, right? And you can see here that you see this one here saying exercise. So this means this is actually a lab. So when we go here, for example, let's check another one. You have all those topics that are being covered on that module, including another one starting with exercise. So this is another lab. So every time you see that format, the first word saying exercise, it means that it is actually a lab. So when we go here, you can click directly through here, or we can go through the module itself. And you're going to have the same view that we just went through. And you can click here, or you can just start your module. The module will start and it will go through each topic until you get to the exercise. And when you get to the exercise, you see here, the same here, you can access all the topics covered by that module. And then the exercise, which is where we are right now. And then you can launch the lab, right? And that lab is actually, let me present it again, just a second. It will pop up a page like that for you, which you're gonna have a virtual server, right, for you. With, in our case, for the P300, it has Windows 10, Visual Studio Code, Azure Data Studio, and SQL Server Management Studio, and also the subscription and the resource group on Azure Portal available for you, so you can try the labs. So it's really cool. If you haven't given that a try, I would highly recommend it you do, because our labs are focused on a lot of those concepts we just talked about. We have labs on performance monitoring. We have labs on, you name it, provision a SQL database, right? Or identify blocking and locking, just to name a few, right? Every module, not every, but 90% of the modules, you're going to have a lab associated to it. So please give it a try. And here, if you don't, so we do recommend your first try be on the hosted lab that we offer through Microsoft Learn or Structure Lab training, but you can only bring your own subscription, right? If you don't have a subscription, you can apply online. So you can apply for a free trial, but you can also use the subscription that you have to create your own labs. So for that, what we can do, you can see here this link up here. It's important to mention this is our GitHub repo, right? So that will point you to that page. And what it does, you're gonna have here, if you click on that link here on the repo, you're gonna see all the labs that we have. So we have that option as well. If you prefer to bring your own subscription and try all the labs in your own subscription, you can do that as well. And just one comment, since we're already here, super excited. But here you have this issue tab here. So every time you try your lab on your own and you find any issue, something awkward, something weird, something that should be that way and is not the way it's supposed to be, you can always create an issue for us. We are constantly monitoring all the issues in our repos. So you can just come here, new issue, and we're going to receive it and we're going to take care of it. Okay. Just want to make sure that I let you guys know, all of you, about that as well. Okay. So we talked a lot about it, right? We covered the topics and the labs. On the next slide, though, I want to talk about tips to prepare. Those are things that I personally do when I'm trying to learn about a new concept or when I'm trying to take a new exam. So first thing, I make sure that I go through the modules that their certification covers, like we did here, right? Make sure that you understand all the topics being covered by our object domain, right? And then try the hands-on labs. This is important because it will bring you some awareness of what we are talking about. Sometimes you read a lot about a concept, but only when you try yourself is that when you fully learn and you fully get what you were referring to, right? And another tip that I'll give you, refer to SQL Docs, right? SQL Docs is our source of truth when we are talking about the latest future and the latest documents. So if you want to learn about a specific topic, so make sure you check in SQL Docs for it. And build your experience with technology. So, what I'm saying here is try to leverage everything that you learn or everything. So, you learned about, for example, temporal tables, right? It's a cool feature, but you're not sure if you should or should not implement in your own environment. Baby, bring it on. Talk to someone in your team, share that concept, do a demo, right? Someone, people don't understand what they don't understand, right? Try to involve folks in the decision making as well so you can implement and help to implement and give ideas. So don't keep it the goodness that you are learned about SQL along the way. Don't keep it to yourself. Spread the word and talk to other folks in the team, and that maybe will make you succeed in implementing those and having the hands-on experience that you may think you need. Um, and I think now, Sandra, it's up to you. It's your turn. How we are on time?
We are doing great, Juliani. This was fantastic. All the things that you just shared, it's amazing. I was so surprised on all this content and these resources, the labs. Thank you for showing all these. So I'm gonna
Of
spend
course.
the last few minutes for our session. If you still have questions, we will still be around here for a few more minutes, so be sure to ask your questions. But in the meantime, I'm gonna give you some information of what to expect about Microsoft exams. So if you haven't taken a Microsoft exam before, just be aware there will be something between 40 and 60 questions. And this is just a range. Every exam is different, so you might have different questions from one exam or from the other. And if you take the same exam multiple times, if you fail and you take it again, you will always get the same number of questions. But maybe if you take the exam later, 6 months later, maybe it will change. But we have a large banks of questions, so if you take the exam again, you will not see the same questions. Now, some tips: answer all the questions. Even if you are not sure about the answer, be sure you give some answer. And you can always mark a question and come back later and review it. Maybe you will see the answer later. Some questions won't, you can skip questions, but some questions you cannot escape. So be sure that those you need to answer them. Now, plan for about 3 hours at the most. Again, each exam varies, but some of these will some of this time will be just for you to read the instructions and to comment. It's important that you give us feedback on the questions, but at most you should plan for 3 hours so you are not in a rush. um, every exam requires 700 points to pass, and you saw how different topics and different questions will have different weight in the scoring. So be sure to do that. Now, not all the questions are a single choice or multiple choice. We have like 10 different type of questions that you will see in the exam, and some of those questions are even case studies. Some questions are some exams include hands-on labs, so you will actually be presented with a virtual machine to do some to show us how you do the how you solve a situation. If you want to see more information about everything Microsoft exams, go to this web page and you will see there a lot of information. I want to show you really quick the exam sandbox. This is a super cool um, uh, uh, tool that we released recently, especially if this is the first time you are presenting or taking a Microsoft exam. This will give you the full experience. And if you want to get familiar with the type of questions, you can see here, you can see different type of questions and you can see how it feels in real life. So you can see the type of questions and all the stuff. I'm not going to do all the demo here, but be sure you take a look at the demo exam in this link. Now, another resource I want to share with you is the Exam Readiness Zone. This is new on Microsoft Learn, and you can see here a lot of resources from Microsoft experts to help you prepare for different exams. So you will find study guides, exam preparation videos, and you will find a practice test also. Not every exam is already included in this exam readiness zone. DP300 is on the way, is not there yet, but come back every now and then because we are releasing new exams all the time to this exam readiness zone. And you will see all the material here. Now, a compilation of the resources that Juliane shared here. The exam guide, you will see the objective domains and all the topics included. If you want to study all these modules that Juliane showed, you can access through this curated collection, or if you want in-depth training, you can go to Microsoft Learning Partners and you can ask for instructor-led training. So all this content that Juliane shared today is what you will get with proctor instructors that will help you through the labs, will answer your questions, you will have interactive, and you will have peers and colleagues that you can work with. Or if you want to do your own learning, you can go through the self-paced learning paths. Remember to have the labs that you saw that Juliane shared here. The links are previously in the deck and the documentation. One last thing before we leave. All Microsoft certifications expire. If they are associated or expert level, they will expire after a year. So you need to be sure that you are renewing your certification. So once you pass your exam DP300 and earn your Azure database administrator associate certification, it will be active for 1 year. And then at the 6 months mark, you will be eligible to renew the certification. So you have 6 months to renew the certification. And once you renew it, it will be active for another year and so on and so on. As long as the certification is available. So it's easy to renew your certification. It's 3 steps. Be sure you connect your Microsoft Learn certification profiles. You can prepare with self-paced training that is curated. And to renew your certification, you only have to pass a free online assessment that is available on Microsoft Learn. So be sure that you are renewing your certification before it expires. If it expires and you don't renew, you will have to take the exam again. If you renew it on time, it's just the free online certification. So these are some resources, and you'll get access to this deck to renew your certification and learn more about renewals. And we thank you. We appreciate your time here. We hope this was a good investment of your time. And thank you for attending. And we hope you keep enjoying your Data Platform Virtual Summit 2022.